Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome along to this afternoon's webinar where we're looking at importing records into Sage 50 accounts. Session should last about 45 minutes, plenty of time to get your questions submitted along the way as well. And we've got Jackie and Abby on hand today who will be on hand to answer any questions that you might have. A little bit of housekeeping just before we get started. If I just flick past one of this wrong slides. So a little bit of housekeeping. You don't need a microphone for these sessions. If you've got one and you enable it, you'll find it's just muted. However, you can still enter questions and submit them to the team today by popping them into the questions panel in the bottom right-hand corner. If you can't currently see that panel, all you need to do on your toolbar is click that little icon, the one that looks like the speech bubble containing the question mark, and that should then expand the panel. You've got the box, type in your comment or your question, click send, and one of the team will pick that up. So we'll try our best to answer as many as we can. If you want a copy of today's slides, you can download those as well. These will be made available to you afterwards as well if you don't get a chance to download those, or you want to see what they're like first of all. But do take an opportunity now if you get the chance. Now, we will be recording today's session as well, and that will also be made available to you afterwards. So if you feel like you want to take notes or anything like that, not as much pressure then, because you can watch the recording back later on if required. And there's loads of information on what we're covering available from our help centre. This is what we're going to be covering in today's session. So a little bit of background. So starting with an introduction to importing. We'll then look at preparing your data, so what's involved in that. We're then going to run through a series of demonstrations. So I'll be sharing my screen and showing you the import file and then running through the import itself just to try and familiarize you with that. Hopefully you'll start maybe thinking about some opportunities when you could use the import option to save you some time as well. As normal, I like to cover troubleshooting as well. So what do you do when things don't quite go to plan? So if you try to import and it doesn't quite work, what would you do then? So potentially there's a few errors you could get during the import process. So we'll cover that in detail as well. And then just at the end, I'll explain more about the additional support that's available to you. Right, now before I do that, I want to quickly run a poll. So just to get a little bit of background just before we run through the webinar today. So a quick question for you. Have you imported data before? So just give me a yes or no. Now I'll wait till I get a decent percentage of you having voted for that one. Again, if you haven't, maybe you don't, you've come along to see what import's about. So you won't have imported before. So let me know, just give me a yes or a no. So hopefully those of you that haven't imported before will potentially see the benefits, and those of you that have, maybe you've come along today just for a little bit of reassurance that what your understanding of it is correct, and maybe you'll also think of some additional opportunities and pick up some tips along the way as well. Right, let me just close that and I'll share the results with you as well. So about 2/3 of you haven't imported before and about 1/3 of you have. So hopefully there's something for everyone in the session today. Right, let's pop back to the slides and we'll get started with the webinar itself. So a little bit of background first of all. Why would you use import? Well, if you've got a large amount of data that you want to bring into Sage accounts, or maybe you want to make changes to multiple records, then using import can actually save you time. So it can be a really quick process once you've run through that a few times. So it brings all of the data into your software in one go, rather than sitting there manually keying it in. Now, there are two main uses for importing as well. One is to use it to add in new data, so adding new records such as new customers, new products, but also recording new transactions as well. So if that information is generated maybe by some other software, you could use import to bring that information in, rather than maybe sitting waiting from a printout and sitting manually entering that. The other use that many people will not realize that you can do is use the import option to update your existing information. Now, you can only do that for records. You can't update existing transactions. You can add new transactions, but you can't update existing transactions. Whereas records, things like credit limits, addresses, etc., they may change. So you can use the import option to update existing records. Now, benefits-wise, it's going to save you time. You'll see today, I'm going to start with a blank company, and you'll see that my customer list will build up quite quickly. Keying in names and addresses, I think everyone would agree, it's a time-consuming task. There's always going to be some sort of shortcuts here and there, including the new paste option for addresses that was introduced in 28.1, but generally keying in records and setting them up is a time-consuming task. Now, the import option is quite flexible these days as well. So you've got the data import wizard, which will guide you through that task. And obviously we're running through that quite a few times in the session today to try and familiarize you with it and show you the ins and outs of that. And it also avoids mistakes as well. So imagine you've got a report, you were keying in 50 names and addresses, for instance. You're probably going to make a few typos along the way or key something into the wrong field. So it avoids that. Whatever information is in the file itself, when you import that, that's the information it brings in. Now, if you have downloaded these slides as well, these green buttons that I've included will link off to the Help Center articles. They're really easy to find anyway, but again, those options will work if you've downloaded the slides. Now, what can you import? Now, you'll see today as we work through the import wizard, it's going to give you a list of the type of data that you want to import, but generally they're broken down into two categories. There's records in the form of things like customers, suppliers, product records, and there's also transactions. So audit trail transactions, stock transactions, project-only transactions. Now, the options that you have available to you will depend on your software variant. So will depend on whether you are using Sage 50 Accounts Essentials, Standard, or Professional level. So I'm going to be using the Professional level today, but I am going to be importing, and I'm going to concentrate on customers and suppliers today, just because that's available to everyone. And it's probably when you look at import, maybe one of the areas when you first think, right, well, actually I could bring in new customers in this way, and it may save you some time. So we'll be running through loads of examples of importing today. Now, as far as preparing your data is concerned, you've got two choices. One is to use one of these standard Sage import templates. I'm going to show you how to access those in a moment, give you an idea what they look like and how you use them. And the other option is to use your own file. So as long as you've got the right information in there, you can obviously use your own file. Now, what you can't import, and I'll quickly mention, just almost go back a step as well, should have mentioned this one. What you can't import is invoices into the invoice list. You can't import quotations onto the quotations list, orders. And some people think about, with regard to transactions, what about if I download my bank statement? There are other better options for bank statements. So if you do look to download your bank statement, you probably actually, by the time you key in the missing information into that file, it would have been easier and quicker just to key it in. Right, let's have a look at the import templates though. So I'll quickly share my screen at this point, and we'll start running through a few demos here and there. So to access the import wizard, we go to File at the top and then down to Import. It's just going to ask me to prompt me to close other windows, so we just click yes to that. And it takes me on to step one on the import wizard. And the first thing I want to look at is this link here in the second paragraph. It just mentions about the templates that are available. So you just click that and it will take you onto the hard disk of your PC, and it will show you the templates that are provided for you. So these should be installed on your PC. If you find that you've got a blank screen when you go in there, you're either going to need to reinstall your software or copy that. If you're running across a network, you may be able to copy those templates from one of your other PCs. Now, I'll just pick on this customer record full template just to give you an idea what one looks like. So we'll open that. So this is the template that's provided for you. Now you'll see we've got coloured headings. So things like the account reference is what you would term a required field. So when it's this sort of a turquoise colour at the top, you must have something in that column. So in this case, the account reference. So each record that you want to import must have a unique reference. The ones in yellow are optional fields, so you can choose to put something in there or not. You don't have to complete all of them. Your file may have different headings, but because the account reference is a required field, your own file must include that. Now, if you are using one of the templates, you'll see they've got these sort of the little sort of triangle in the top right hand corner of the cell on the headings, and that just means if you hover over the cell, it will show you the comment box, and that will give you more information about the account reference that I'm hovering over right now. So it tells me it's a required field, tells me description wise it's a unique code used in Sage Accounts to identify your customers. I'm sure you're familiar with a customer account reference. The format is alphanumeric, so it can be a combination of letters and numbers, and it's a maximum of 8 characters, and it gives you an example there as well. And you will find that if you hover over each of the column headings, they've also got these comment lines as well. So it's a good area to get just that little bit of extra information. Now, the templates themselves are essentially read-only, and that just means it protects the file, so you're not going to override it. But if you need to use it, all you need to do, file, save as, save it somewhere so you'll be able to find it easily enough, and then you can start either entering your information or pasting it in. But I'm going to show you a few variations today. One, I'll be using templates, but I'll also be using my own files as well. So you don't necessarily need to use the template. The template does have its advantage because it will be quicker and it's a little bit easier then to import. But other than that, you're achieving the same thing. You're bringing in your information, and hopefully that will save you a bit of time. Right, so I've got some files that I've already prepared for the session today. Again, if you think of any questions along the way, no matter what that is, if you pop them into the questions panel, and either Jackie or Abby will pick that up for you. Right, let's quickly pop back to the slides. So we're going to run through a few demonstrations with you using the data import wizard. Again, trying to familiarize you with the steps, give you an idea of what the options are and what's required at each stage. So I'm going to use it to mainly add new customer records, but I will show you how you can use it to refresh your information as well, so to update existing records. So let's get stuck into some demonstrations. We'll switch back to my screen and we'll run through a bit of a demo. Right, let me find my folder containing the files I'm after. So these are the files I'm going to be using for the import today. And the first one that we're going to look at is some customers. So this is a demo where I'm going to be using my own file. It's saved as an Excel file and it does have headings. So if I just open that one, and you'll see it's just a basic file. So we got some account references in there, got the name of the customer, got the address in there, a contact name, and also some telephone numbers as well. So basic information. There is more that you can import, but I'm gonna leave it at that just so it's nice and short. Now, one of the things, and I'll remind you of this a little bit later, when you come to import, you've got to make sure that the file that you are importing is actually closed. So make sure that you don't have it open in Excel. Right, let's go into Sage. Right, now just before I do start importing, if I pop into customers, you'll see it's completely blank. So this is a completely blank company that I've got here. It's just a basic shell of a company. There's no customers, there's no suppliers. We've got nominal codes, but there's no balances or anything. Products as well, nothing there. So we're going to import some customers to begin with using that file that we just looked at. So into File. Now, I must mention as well, just at this stage as well, is that importing, just in case anyone's about to ask this, particularly if you work on a network, importing is classed as what you would term an exclusive program request. So you you must be the only person that's logged into that company to be able to proceed. If there's anyone else logged into that company, you will get a warning saying you can't access this at this stage because such and such is logged in. So if you're about to access import, everyone else has to log out. Similarly, if you're in the import wizard and someone tries to log in, it'll not let them. It'll give them a similar message saying that you're in the import process. Anyway, we're going to go to File and then Import. It launches the wizard, so this is what we looked at earlier, the welcome, step 1. On step 1, it does mention and then includes the backup option. Now, I can't stress the importance of backing up at this stage enough. I'm going to keep skipping past it personally because it's not actual live company data that I'm using today. But the reason for backing up at this stage is just in case you import the wrong file, or maybe you import the file more than once if it was a list of transactions, for instance. Easiest way to undo that issue, if it is practical to do so, is to restore the backup that you would take at this stage. So clicking backup would just launch the backup wizard. So just pop in your file name, choose where you want to save it, make sure you include your data files, and then click OK. And that will just run through for you. Once you're done, you can then move on to step 2. So we click next, and then this is where it's going to prompt you, what is it you're trying to import? So we're going to concentrate on records today. There is a webinar recording of how you go about importing audit trail transactions. And I've included a link on the handout to that one. But you'll also get the link on the follow-up email later today as well, which will enable you to watch the recordings. So look out for that one as well. So you want to find out how to import things like bank payments, direct debits, standing orders, things like that, then do watch that recording. Right, so we'll select customer records. We'll click next. It takes us on to step 3. So step 3 is all about specifying the data source. So where is the data held and what is it you want to import? So you can choose between a comma separated or a CSV file, or probably more likely these days, an Excel worksheet. So mine are all Excel worksheets, I think, in today's webinar. So choose that option. It's then a case of browsing through for the file that you want to import. So I'm going to choose that first one. We'll click open. We then need to indicate whether the import file, does it have headings at the top or not? So is it purely data? So straight into the customer record information, but mine does contain headings. So make sure you've got the box ticked. You can always come back through the wizard if you find out or you selected the wrong option. So mine does contain headings. So we click next to move on to step 4. Now, when you first come into here, you'll just have a blank column. And this is the field mappings option. And this will differ as well. So if you've got some headings in your file which match what's required in Sage, so it's got exactly the same spelling of that, whatever the title is, it will automatically match it for you. It will map it for you, I should say. If you're using the templates, because obviously all the headings are going to be the same as what Sage requires, they'll all be mapped for you. So what we're basically saying here is the account reference that Sage requires, which column is that held in your file? So this is what I need to pop into this column here. Now, the only column that I have to map at this stage are the required columns. Depending on what you're importing, it will vary. Some will have more required fields than others. So if you're importing transactions, for instance, you might find there's a few asterisks in this column. But for a customer import, the only thing I do need that's required is an account reference. So if I just click into this field and click on the drop down, it will give me a list of the column headings. So the account reference that Sage requires is held in my ACREF column. The account name of the customer, that's held in my, I've called it name. And then street 1, street 2, town, county, postcode. On my file, I've just called it add 1, add 2, add 3, add 4, and add 5. Now, if you know what it's called, you can just cycle through it by, if I just tap A a few times on my keyboard, it'll cycle through the import fields, the titles, beginning with the letter A. And I can do that for each of them. Sometimes it's a little bit easier if you've got quite a bit, quite a big spreadsheet that you're importing from. You might have loads of information in there that you don't want to import. So if it's not a required field, I could just leave it blank. I don't have to import everything. So I'll just pop that one in. Now we'll come down to contact name. So in my case, I've just called it contact. And then the final one for telephone number is just tel. So they are the fields that I want to import. When you're importing, make sure you have to have something mapped against whatever's flagged as required. So have a look down your list. You can see it goes down quite far for the customer records. So you can see the type of information that you can import. So all of this information could be included in your import file. So things like direct debit email, LinkedIn address, Facebook address. There's loads in there. So email addresses, banking information. So you can see that there's loads in there that I could import. Dennis, you mentioned in there, can you create your own fields? You can't. You could use one of the you could potentially use a field for something else. So if there's a field, particularly in a customer record, that you don't use for anything specific, you want to use that to record some of the information instead. You potentially could get around it that way, but you can't add to the fields that you can import into. So anyway, I'm just going to leave those ones flagged as what we term the mapped fields. So we're mapping this information to go into the account reference in Sage. I'm going to come back to saving the mapping, etc. a little bit later on. So I'll just click next. It takes me on to step 5. And if I'm ready to go, I just click import. Now we'll actually do 2 passes. That was quite quick on mine because I've got such a small file. So we'll do 2 passes of the information. One, it will read and validate the information, make sure it's right. The second pass will where it's writing the information into Sage itself. So it's telling me these records have been imported. So if I just close out of that and then pop into customers, and you can see the records that we've just imported. Now I can make amends at that point if I needed to. So if I wanted to go into there and change the address or add other information in, just like a normal customer record at that point. So that was the first one, importing from a file that contains headings. Now we've got a similar file this time. So this one here, this time it doesn't contain any headings. So it's purely customer information. So there are no headings at the top. Now when that's the case and we're working through that, through particularly the mapping area, we're going to need to know what's contained in each of the columns. So sometimes it can be a good idea to take a screenshot of it at that point. So it just so happens I've got mine in the correct order for me for saying, right, the account references in column A, the names in column B, the addresses in C, D, E, F, G. Again, make sure that file is closed. Back to Sage. I'm going to go File, Import. And then again, you would back up at this stage. Don't get caught out by that one, by maybe accidentally importing suppliers into your customers list and then thinking, oh, I've now got to delete them manually because I haven't backed up. That could be a big job. So make sure you take that back up. So we're going to follow this through again. So next, I'm going to import customer records again. It's an Excel file. It's this one here. This is the one I want to import. Now this time it doesn't contain headings. Now if I did leave that ticked and I says, oh, I think it contains headings, I'll click next and I come onto the mapping, you can see it's reading that first line as headings. So it's thinking that first customer details are the column headings, and I don't want that. So I just click back. It doesn't contain headings. Then click next to take me back to the field mappings. And this is where, rather than it listing headings, I now need to say, right, the account reference information, that's in column A. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to be in column A, it could be in any of the columns. I just need to specify which column does have that information. So again, nice and easy. If you know what column it's in, again, I could just type the relevant letter in there. So I've kept it nice and simple. And then the final one was column I. So that's everything mapped that needs to be, plus the optional fields. So B through to I in my case. Click next, click import. It runs through, and again, it's saying, right, these fields are now imported for me. So we'll click close, back into customers, and you can now see we've got quite a few records there. So the length of time it's taken me to get to this point in the webinar, there's no chance that I could have keyed those in manually. I'm not very quick at typing, and if I had been typing them in, there'd probably be quite a few typos in amongst that as well. Right, let's move on to the next example. Now we're going to see the difference this time, because this time I've used one of the Sage import templates. So I'll open that one just so you can see what that looks like. So I've filled in the information. I've put a bit extra information in as well this time. So I've got things like default nominal codes, tax codes, payment terms, etc. So there's loads of information that I may choose to import and I might not. We can see it's got those in. So it's from Rob 001 all the way down to this Peter Young account. So again, make sure you've got that closed. Back to Sage, and we'll run through that import wizard one more time. So File, Import. Again, back up. Customer Records. It's an Excel file, so browse for it. It's that one there. It does contain headings. It's the template. And this time when I click Next, you'll see it's popped all the mapping in for me. Now, because I've used the template, it'll even map fields or columns that maybe I don't have any information in. So you can remove them if you want to. So if there was a field that you thought, well, it contains information, but I don't want to import that information, you know, for instance, the fax number, but didn't want to import that, all I would do is I would scroll up and leave it blank. It's not a required field, so I can leave that blank. But once I've mapped what I need to, click Next, click Import, and again, that's it done. So try not to get overconfident with that. You will find yourself speeding up with it once you've done it a few times. So make sure you take that back up. So again, if we just pop back to customers, you can see I've got 29 customers. It's telling me at the top there. So all the way down to that Peter Young account. Now you see this time, because obviously I included the template and the credit limit was included in the import template that I've used, and I had that information on that template, it's popped it in there for me. It wasn't included in the original ones that I imported. Right, okay, let's go back to the files again. Now this time I've got a worksheet that's got, or a workbook in Excel that's got multiple worksheets. So you can see it's got the two tabs at the bottom. And chances are, if it's your own file, chances are I think by default it sets up 3. You may have renamed one of them. So you can see I've got one called Customers, and you can see I've got one called Marketing. So if that is the case, it's going to look a little bit different when you go through the import option. So it'll be a minor change. So again, File, Import. Let's customer records I want to import. Excel file, browse for the file, select open. At this time, I get an extra option here. So which of the worksheets in my Excel file contains the information that I want to import? So it doesn't necessarily have to be on the first one. It will give you that choice. And if you've got more than 3 worksheets, again, I think you can have just about as many as you want these days, it will obviously just let you scroll through them and select the appropriate one. The only thing with using different worksheets is that the information must start on the top line. If you've got a blank line, it wouldn't give you any options. So this one, for instance, on the marketing, I had some information, but when I click next and I get onto the mapping, you'll see it's just completely blank. So if you do find that may catch you out, you may just need to go back to your worksheet and delete the blank line at the top to get your information, either the data or the column headings, onto row 1 in your worksheet. Let's just cancel out of that one. Right, next file. Now this time I'm going to show you what it looks like with the mapping and how you can save it. So this would come in useful, the mapping option, if your data is coming from a certain, so maybe it's a repeat procedure, but your data, new customer records, for instance, are coming from a set location. So you're always provided with that information in the same format. So to save you going through that mapping process each and every time, you can save your mapping. So what's this one this time? So I've got some beginning with Zs. They're not in my list just yet, but it will be in just a couple of minutes. So what I'm going to do first of all, I'm just going to go File and Import. We'll again customer records, browse for that file. So this is the one I'm going to use in the example. It does contain headings. And what I'm going to do is, on the mapping, I'll just quickly fill it in. So this is just like what we did at the beginning. So it's the same sort of mapping that I've used. So to save me having to go through this each and every time, and bear in mind, obviously you've got loads of fields that you could import. Mine's quite quick because there's not that many fields that I'm importing. But to save me going through that each and every time and saying, right, that information's in this column, what I can do is, when I get to this stage, I could say, right, that's it mapped. I want to save that mapping. I'll just save it with that name. So give it a name. So I've just called mine Michael Customers, and I'll override my existing file. And what I'll do is I'm just going to quickly clear it and cancel out. So let's say I'm coming in and I've got another file that I want to import. So same process, file import. I take the backup, I click next, I choose customer records, I browse for that file that I want to bring in. It does contain headings. I click next, and it's blank at the moment. So what I can now do is say, right, I want to load this mapping. So that's the file there that I want to upload. You can have different mappings as well, depending obviously where the file's coming from. If you've imported it once before, if you're going to get that file again, save your mapping. So I'll select that, click open. It loads it for me, so it knows what needs to be mapped against each field. So I don't need to do it manually this time, again, saving me a little bit of time. Click next, click import. And that's those 5 files imported at that point. So again, back to customers, scroll down to the bottom, and there they are. So Adina, you mentioned there is a webinar for importing bank transactions or any other transactions for that matter. I did mention it earlier. If you've downloaded the slides, and you'll see this a little bit later, I've included the link to the recording of that one. We don't have that one planned in as a live session at the moment, but there is a recording of that one, so watch out for that one. The link will also be included on your follow-up email, which you get round about an hour after we finish today. So just watch out for that one. But again, it will complement this one very nicely. And that's another one that you'll start thinking, oh, where could I save time? So those repeat transactions, standing orders, direct debits that you're probably sitting there keying in on a regular basis, maybe things like monthly depreciation, anything like that where it's repeat transactions, sometimes it can be a little bit easier to prepare that in a spreadsheet and then import that information rather than sitting keying it in time and time again. So just watch out for that one. Right, so what we've looked at so far is using import to, or importing of records to add in new records. But what about updating existing records? So let's have a look at the next file. Just jog my memory what we're going to cover on that one. So this is a list of my customers again, and I've got some credit limits. So those first set of accounts that I hadn't imported, or that I did import, sorry, didn't have credit limits. So I'll choose a random number just so you can see, and I'll save the file. So on that ABS garages, it's that one there. Now, to be able to update existing records, what you must still specify the account reference, and it's still the key to importing records. If that account reference doesn't exist when you import, it will generate a brand new record for you. If it does exist, so when I import this file in a couple of minutes' time, it will look to see, right, is there an account called ABS001? Is there an account with that account reference? If there is, it will add the information that I choose to import. It will update that into the existing record. So that's the key to that one. So if you are importing brand new records, make sure beforehand that none of the account references actually already exist within Sage. It's not going to warn you about that as part of the import process. It won't say, right, you've chosen to import these 10 records, 5 of these account references already exist. It doesn't do that. So you would need to check that manually. Anyway, we'll save that file and close out of it. We'll go back to Sage, and you can see ABS and a few of the others as well don't currently have an account, a credit limit. A few of the others as well currently have 3,000. So you'll see that that gets overwritten as part of this process as well. So into File, Import. Again, make sure you take that back up. Customer Records. Browse for the file that you want to import. It's this one. It does contain headings. Now you'll see it's got some of the mapping done already for me. Some of it's changed, so I'm just going to clear that map. I'm going to start again. This time, all I'm going to import from that file, I'm not going to import the name or whether it's inactive or the other fields. All I want to import, first of all, the account reference. I must map that one. It's a required field. And the other one I want to map is, if I can find it on the list, is credit limit. That's all I'm going to map. So that's the information that I want to bring in from the import file. So I click Next, click Import. It tells me it's imported into these records. Click Close, Customers, and you can now see they've got that information in there. So it's imported that random value that I keyed in as the credit limit a little bit earlier. Now, importing records into the other areas, it's pretty much the same. So bear that one in mind. If you're importing suppliers, product records, yes, the information that you can import will be a little bit different in those areas, or obviously product codes, descriptions, etc. So again, a little bit different, but the process is the same way that you work through the wizard, preparing your data beforehand. Again, you've got the same options. But again, can be a good time saver. Now, a good little tip, this one, if you wanted to maybe export this information, what I could do is I could click Send to Excel. So here's a little trick for you. So let's say I wanted to update credit limits, but they're not all going to be £1,000. I want to go through and say, right, I want this chunk to be £1,500. Get rid of that blank line. And I'm going to say, right, actually that one, that business exhibitions, I want that to be 1200. The next one down for county golf supplies, I want that to be 1750. And then what I'll do is I'll just save this. I'll save it to my desktop. And let's say credit limits. I'll save it in an Excel file, pop it on my desktop just so I can easily find it, save it. Then we'll close the file and I'll just go quickly through and import that updated information. Now, if it was just minor changes like that, it may be easier just to go into the records and make those changes. But if I just pop into File, Import, Customer Records again, browse for that file. This time it was on my desktop. It's that file there that we just created. So I'll say the account reference. It's in the A/C column. And again, if I just scroll down, find credit limit, there it is. It's already picked that one up. It's recognized the heading. So that one's already mapped for me. I'll just click Next, Import, click Close. And if we go back to Customers, you'll see those two there that I just amended the information on. So it can be quite a quick process for updating existing records as well. Hope that makes sense. You've probably not used that process, but I just wanted to make you aware that potentially you've got that option available to you. So you've seen what it looks like when everything goes according to plan. What happens when it doesn't? And what are the common pitfalls? So let's quickly pop back to the slides. So if an import fails, it will give you, potentially, you can check the information in the Help Center. And again, if you've downloaded the slides, the green option there, the import errors, it will take you to the relevant Help Center article, just a case of searching for your particular error that it's come up with. Common ones, we already mentioned one of them. Import file is still open. So it will give you a prompt. It will say, right, you can't do this. There's an error. You've got to close the file, make sure it is closed. Another common one, particularly for customers and suppliers, is illegal sales purchase ledger account reference. Now, doesn't mean it's illegal, it means it's not permitted. So, for instance, you might have an account reference which is more than the permitted 8 characters. I've got an example of that one as well. And also, watch out for blank lines. I've got a demo of that one. We'll quickly run through these two and then we'll wrap up. Right, back to my screen. So back to my list of files. So I've got this file prepared here, list of suppliers this time. And you can see this account here, this Newtown 001. So that's more than 8 characters. So it's not permitted. You can't import that. An account reference for a customer supplier is 8 characters max. So if I try to import this file, you'll see what it looks like when there's an error and how it reacts. So as you can see, nothing in my suppliers list at the moment. If we go to File, Import, and again, just work through the wizard. Make sure I choose the right option this time. Browse for that file. Click Open. It does contain headings. Oh, I've clicked Next twice there. So I'll just quickly map the fields. I'll just do the 2 for speed. Click Next, Import, and you can see this time it stops. So it tells me there's an error in record 4. The account reference, it's an illegal purchase ledger account reference. Now, if you weren't sure what that means, again, check the information that's available in our Help Center. As you can imagine, with all the fields that are available and the various types of import, there's quite a few different errors you could potentially get. So it might be an invalid nominal code or tax code or value. You may have, maybe you've popped a date in the value field or vice versa. So it would be incorrect information in the relevant field. One thing to be aware of with this one, when it says error in record 4, if you click Edit Import, Record 4 is actually, because I've got headings at the top, record 4 is actually on line 5. So I would just need to find out what the problem is, correct it, save the change, and then I could go back into Sage and import that file. The last one that I'm going to demonstrate to you is the blank line. So here's a good example. So we've got we've got 6 accounts, then there's a blank line, and then we've got these accounts beginning with W. So when I try to import this file, you're going to see what happens. So when the import gets to a blank line, it thinks that's the end of the import file. So you're going to see what happens when we quickly run through this example. So back into Sage, still no suppliers in my account at this stage. But back to File, into Import, Supplier Records, browse for the file that we want to import, click Open. It does contain headings. I'll just quickly do the mapping. I'll just do the name and the address. I'll just quickly go through that one again. Again, if you specify something and you think, actually, I've chosen the wrong thing, or I don't want to import that field, just from the drop down, scroll up to the top and choose the blank line. But we'll put that one as address 5. And then we'll click Next, click Import. So it tells me that these are the correct files that have been imported. Doesn't give me an error because it's hit that blank line. So that's when it thinks that's the end of the file. So watch out for that. If you try to organize your accounts, you know, in your spreadsheet, for instance, you might have a list of trade accounts, then you might have a list of retail accounts. You may have put a sort of thinking you were being organized, put a blank line between them. It's going to stop as soon as it hits that blank line. So again, watch out for that one. But that brings us to the end of the demos, and I hope that's giving you maybe some food for thought. Maybe you'll go away and start thinking, oh, well, what about this? Could I import this? If you've got questions like that, do get in touch. If you get in touch with our support team, and they'll be able to discuss that with you. For importing transactions, I've included the link on the slide, but again, you'll get the link to the recordings in around about an hour's time. Loads of upcoming sessions. Tomorrow we've got user management, followed by what's new on Thursday. Loads of sessions booked in for that what's new as well, and loads of other topics coming up as well. If you can't make the session, watch out for the recordings being made available afterwards. Again, all these sessions are free for you to attend. Now that brings us to the end of the session, and it looks like the questions looks like they've all been picked up so far. So if you've got any other questions, if you want to quickly pop them in, we'll just hang around for a couple of minutes to see if any additional questions do come through. If you're about to leave, watch out for the little survey pop-up as you leave today's session. If you've got any thoughts or ideas or feedback that you'd like to share with us, if you can take a minute to pop some comments on there, it'd be greatly appreciated. We love reading those comments just to see if we're hitting the mark or not. But I'm hoping you found today's session useful, giving you, again, you may go away and you'll start spotting these opportunities maybe going forwards and think, well, I'm doing the same process time and time again, keying in similar information. That's maybe where import could help and start saving you a little bit of time to automate it. Dennis, you mentioned about importing products and Nominal. I've got a couple of files prepared for that one, so we'll just let the webinar end, and then if anyone wants to hang on, I'll just quickly run you through those two myself. It's not a problem. So if anyone wants to hang around and see that bit as well, I'll include that as well. But watch out for the follow-up email as well. So you'll get that around about an hour's time. It's got links to register for future webinars, and also so you can watch recordings as well. So all of the questions we have had have been answered. If anyone does want to hang around just for that little bit extra of covering importing of products and nominal codes, I'll quickly run through that as well. But otherwise, that brings us to the end of what we'd planned to cover. Just going to mute my line for a moment, but it brings us to the end of the session. So hopefully we'll see you on some other sessions. Just going to mute my line for a minute, and then we'll come back and I'll run those couple of extra demos. Okay, I'm back live. So what I'll quickly do, I'll just share my desktop and I'll quickly run through a couple of extra demos for you. So nominal records and products. So I've got 2 files prepared. Now, nominal records, if I'm hoping you can hear me at that point. Looks like my headset disconnected there. Sorry about that one. Right, okay, so I've got these 2 files. So I've got one for nominal records. Now, nominal records, I've got next to nothing in there. I've popped in a bank account and I've popped in a brand new nominal code. Now, there's a trick to importing bank accounts, and it's just, we're talking about when we're importing, when I'm talking about importing a bank account, I'm just talking about the record itself to save you having to set that up manually. I'm not talking about bank transactions, I'm just talking about the record itself. So when I go into, if I go back to Sage, I'm talking about adding a record into this list. Similar for nominal codes as well. I'm talking about adding a record into this list. Now, if I go back to, first of all, to the import template, so again, easiest way to access that one is access the wizard, click the link, and you'll find it on the list, so nominal record. So this is a blank template. So what you can import as far as nominal records is concerned is the reference, the name, and then you've got potentially budget values that you can import as well. You can also import prior year figures directly into the record as well. And prior years go back, you can go up to, I think, is it 5 years? So yeah, so anything up to 5 years worth of monthly figures that you could potentially import into a record. But all I'm going to do in mine is I've popped in a reference and a name. So just going back to my file, is this one. I've popped in a reference. I want this one to be a bank account. Now, I can't as such flag it as a bank account at this stage. It's just a number and a name at this stage. So it's going to appear on the nominal ledger list. This one, I just want it to be nominal 9500 that I want to add. So again, make sure you've got it closed. Back to Sage. So it was 1201 and 9500. So they don't exist at the moment. So you'll see 1201, it's not there. And also in nominal codes, it's not there. And 9500 as well. That one's not there either. So we'll quickly run through the import. So wizard, exactly the same. Nominal accounts I want to import this time. Next, browse for the file. It does contain headings, it's the template after all. Now, because I'm using the template when it comes to the field mapping, the headings in that template, they match what Sage requires, so it automatically maps it. Again, if I wanted to just maybe leave existing information in place, so if I had an annual budget, for instance, and I think, well, I don't want to override that, all I need to do is make sure that field is blank. So nothing mapped to it. So it's not going to bring anything into that field. Otherwise, I've got the required fields mapped. So the only one for nominal is the reference, and I've got the name mapped. I'm not bothered about the others. Click next, click import. tells me it's imported the 2. And then if I go into nominal codes, 1201, there it is there. It's appearing just with the name bank. And also, if I scroll down to the bottom, you see the other ones there as well. Now, if you import a nominal code that you want to use as a bank account, you've sort of got this one opportunity at this stage. And this would be the same as if you've created a bank account manually, but you've actually done it from within the nominal codes window. That nominal code, 1201, it doesn't appear on my list yet. So to get it to appear on my list, I need to convert that brand new nominal code into a bank record. I do that by just clicking, as if I'm going to create a new bank record, type in the number. So it was 1201. I'm going to click save, and it tells me a nominal account with this reference already exists. Do you wish to convert it into a bank account? And all I do is I click yes. So it pulls through the name then. Save it. Products wise, again, much the same. If I just go back to File, Import, and then just quickly whiz through that one, choosing product records. Again, pretty much the same. You're browsing for your file. It's got headings. I've used a template in my example, so everything's mapped. Click Next, Import, and again, that's it done. So pretty straightforward. Hope that explains that one for you there, Dennis. But again, same process. Once you've imported one record, you tend to find you can import the others as well. So hope they prove useful for you as well, those extra couple of demos. Right, so that does bring us to the end of the session. Once again, many thanks for coming along today. I hope you found it useful. If you've got any comments, if you can take a minute to complete that little survey, that should pop up as you leave the session today. That'd be greatly appreciated. We love reading those comments just to see, as I said, just to see if we're hitting the mark or not. So anything and everything, pop it on there. Follow-up email should be with you in round about an hour's time. Hopefully you'll come back. We'll see you on some other webinars as well. If so, hopefully we'll see you again. Many thanks.